Joining me now to discuss the strategic significance of Greenland to the United States is geopolitical analyst Lieutenant Colonel Darin Gaub. Darin, good to have you back. What is the significance of Greenland on the world stage?
Yeah, Greenland's more important than a lot of people have realized for many years, but that's the reason why Russia and China have been spending so much time in the Arctic trying to make sure they can control as much as possible. If you were to take the map and adjust your view of it rather than looking at the equatorial view of your typical world map and turn that to where you're looking down from the North Pole, you'd realize that Greenland dominates it. That's access, that's all these things. And they have other things like rare earth minerals. And not only is it access to the Arctic, but frankly, they have good access to the North Sea shipping lanes around Iceland as well. So there's a lot that can be done with Greenland. And if you get past the politicians that are kind of posturing about this whole thing and talk to the people like I do in Denmark, who are part of my Veterans Coalition, they're going to tell you that, frankly, most of the time, they don't even think about Greenland. They spend $9 billion or more a year, or euros a year on Greenland, and they don't even know why. So it would be money they could keep. They could make some more, frankly, and take it off their plate of having to even to worry about it. So again, the people of Denmark are different than their politicians, as always. And I think this could be a positive move if we do it peacefully and just outright buy it versus anything else.
And to President Trump's reason for this, he said his Golden Dome initiative can only function at its maximum potential if Greenland is included in its geographic scope. What role do you think Greenland would play in that project?
Greenland would look a lot like what Alaska is. It's an early warning and early interdiction for theater intercontinental ballistic missiles and things like that. And so it moves the dome basically further away from mainland American shores and increases its reach. And frankly, if people in Greenland and Iceland and some other countries were to look at it honestly, they'd realize that by us doing that, we're actually increasing not only the ability to defend ourselves as America, but some of that would actually influence and have positive impacts on the self-defense of some of those other nations that function in or near the Arctic regions.
Okay, and President Trump also said, like you mentioned, China and Russia want Greenland. How vulnerable is this island of 54,000 people?
Well, if you're talking about militarily, it's vulnerable to almost anybody at this point. And frankly, only about 7 to maximum 10% of the entire island is actual Danish people. The rest of it is mostly Inuit. Their military is basically non-existent, and anybody who wanted to could largely just walk in there, even though there would, of course, be international outcry and consequences, and rightfully so. And I don't see anybody trying to actually militarily invade Greenland anyways on any side. They're going to try to dominate the island itself via other means without causing that international outcry. But, America's already there too. We've already got an air base in Greenland, so this is not exactly new for us either. So there are many positives to us being able to help with Greenland as well. And that, in the end, that frankly does help NATO as a whole.
And like we discussed moments ago, European leaders are raising concerns about Trump's tariff threats, to say the least. Could his threat against these 8 NATO countries that sent troops to Greenland recently, could that destabilize NATO? And what would that mean for U.S. national security?
This act by itself, I don't think would destabilize NATO. This is mostly political posturing over the current argument. It can be done differently, of course, mostly focused on economics rather than exchanging military personnel. This is really, frankly, not a military mission on either side of this equation. But the tariffs is basically a way to lead the debate economically, which is Trump's way of doing business, and it tends to be fairly effective. It's not always a win, but it can work. And frankly, NATO needs to realize the fact that they can't defend Greenland anyway. So this is all about mostly your national politicians trying to posture for position and not acknowledge the actual reality on the ground in the first place. Most of the time, the Danish don't even realize that there's a Greenland, or they don't really care because it's not really a part of their national equation other than sending them money.
Talk a bit about the threats from China and Russia. I mean, what Critics to this move, to Trump's move to acquire Greenland, say there is no imminent threat to Greenland. And of course, he's seeing something broader than, maybe next week.
Yeah. Unfortunately, one of the things that DC is not very good at is recognizing imminent threats, because they don't think out far enough in the first place and realize what other nations are doing. So is there an imminent threat to Greenland from a military invasion from China or Russia? I would agree that that's probably not realistic. But what is true is that China and Russia seek first to economically dominate regions of the world, or be the predominant influence over them, which Greenland is certainly subject to, as they try to control the Arctic and plant their flag in order to gain resources everywhere from rare earth minerals to oil to other things. So that part is real. I don't see them going to Greenland and trying to militarily occupy and then claim ownership of it. That would not go well for any country attempting to do that.
And just before we move on, I'd like to touch on Iran a little bit. Before that, the president describes this move by these 8 nations that we were talking about moments ago as a very dangerous situation for the safety, security, and survival of our planet. That is a much bigger scope than the United States. What is at stake here beyond U.S. national security?
Well, one of the things that's at stake is whether or not NATO can stay together as a cohesive organization focused on the defense of mainland Europe and the United States against any aggressor, regardless of whether they might come from Russia or China. You can debate whether or not that threat is truly real, that's for sure. But that as an organization for sure is something that would be of concern. You layer that against the problem that's happening in Europe right now, which is essentially many nations being overrun by illegal aliens who've moved in there and turned some of these nations almost entirely Islamist in their governance and their outlook on life. Look at France, the UK, and others. And so that's part of really like the threat to humanity is the resurgence and growth of the Chinese Communist Party influence, which is waning but not gone. The threat of Russia, as always, whether that's real or not, is open for debate. And then the actual loss of Western cultures throughout Europe. By the time you start peeling back that onion and realize what's going on, NATO doesn't look like NATO because Europe's starting to not really look like what Europe is supposed to be. And it grows out from there and it doesn't get any better.
Now, you're bringing in the Middle East, which is a perfect segue here. In the past few days, President Trump thanked the Iranian regime for not executing 800 protesters there. Then he told Politico it's time to look for new leadership in Iran. How would you characterize the president's disposition toward Iran right now?
I think he's, in his mind, trying to thread this needle to where he's not creating such a antagonistic threat towards Iran to where they feel they have no choice but to consider like these public hangings and executions and things like that, while also never leaving diplomacy out of the equation entirely, trying to give it a chance. What I will say is that the statement about the executions, although accurate as far as them not publicly executing people, at least for now, I dare say that is happening regardless behind the scenes and probably inside prisons. And I don't think he doesn't know that. I just think he didn't say it. The Iranian regime will do whatever it takes to maintain its power, and they don't care how many people they kill in the first place.
Colonel,
but go ahead.
Yeah, with 30 seconds remaining, what is the recent uprising against the Iranian regime that we've been hearing so much about? Tell us about the regime's future.
This is the best chance the people of Iran, or as I say, Persia, have to be able to throw off their dictators. It's the best chance they've had since the early 70s to get back an Iran that could be there, which is healthy and prosperous and good for the citizens of that great nation. And I hope it does work out, but they've got to maintain the momentum. They can't quit. And we have to do what we can to help without really boots on the ground or military interaction to an extent that is beyond maybe hitting some key sites or targets like that.
All right, Lieutenant Colonel Darin Gaub, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.